Tom Cousins was younger than 40 when he first came up here to Big Canoe. He first started acquiring land in 1965. Tom Cousins came to visit the lodge sometime in the 60s. He said it was one of the most beautiful places he had ever seen. After Tom Cousins started purchasing land in 1965, in the early 70s, he began to plan, design, and solicit partners to carry out his vision for a second home resort community in the North Georgia mountains. Charles Frazier, also known as Mr. Hilton Head because he developed Hilton Head and Sea Pines, he was the president of Sea Pines Company. He was born in Hinesville, Georgia, and he was about 42 years old when he partnered with Cousins on the Big Canoe project. His expertise lied in second home resorts. His role was to advise, help design the Wolfscratch Village, and housing to conform to a resort-like community. His company was also in charge of marketing Big Canoe. This part of the presentation will give you some insight of what was taking place during the construction phase of Big Canoe. Lake Pettit, Lake Disharoom, the swim club, Wolfscratch Village, the tennis courts, the first golf course, the roads and utilities, the tree toppers, and the Scotty Ridge condos were being built all at the same time. There are only a few photos during this period of construction. In late 1973, there was a contest held, and the contest was who could guess when Lake Pettit was going to fill up. And the way that that was judged is when the water started flowing over the spillway. Now remember, the lodge has been a barn, it's been a residence, it has lodged people coming up for visits with Tom Cousins, and now it is a community type center in the 70s as well, and now it's a POA office. Now you get to see Big Canoe completed. There's no specific dates when it was actually completed, but it was from the period of 1973 to 1974. As you can see, there's no Chevron station and there's no IGA store and there's no Big Canoe Realty in this photo. There's the stone columns that are still here. Don't you just love driving through the main gate? Okay, so we didn't have any security gates. What we had was good-looking security guards. This is Anthony Jones, and he informed me that definitely he was packing a 357 Magnum. So the gates were pretty secure back in the day. The main gate was the only gate into Big Canoe in 1973 and 1974. Just about everyone I've interviewed that came up in the early 70s have a story to tell about the Jeeps. At first, the Jeeps were given to folks for free, and then later they were leased to drive around Big Canoe and the Jeep trails. The tree toppers were octagon-shaped homes that were built for weekenders. The two tree toppers seen here were used as a restaurant and a bar. They were connected together by a walkway. These units could be built in 7 to 14 days. By 1975, one of these was converted to a conference room to accommodate a small congregation for a place to worship. The restaurant serves family style, and the cook was Eunice Johnson, who's the grandmother of Tina Parrish. Everyone says that the food was some of the best cooking they've ever had in Big Canoe. This is an ad in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. This is a portion of the ad. What I wanted you to take a look here is look at the general store to your right, and in the back is the chimneys and how everyone's dressed. The whole idea was for people when they came up on the weekends, it would be a place that they got away, and it was nothing like a metropolitan city, and I think they pulled it off pretty well. So many people have indicated to me that this is a special place to them. Everyone enjoyed the general store. If you take a look at it, it's hard to imagine that this is a new building. That's on purpose, as I said before. They wanted these buildings to look like they're 100 years old. The general store sold quilts. Lucille Tate found a lady in Pickens County, and they started selling the ladies' quilts. And to the right there is Dottie Tate behind the counter, and these are little girls that used to come up on weekends. My favorite pastime was playing checkers at the general store. This is a picture of the inside of the store, and you have Toad Williams and Floyd Blackwell. Bill Tay was the postmaster at the general store for a while. This facility was located downstairs. The Chimneys restaurant was opened in 1974. Don't you just love the way the server was dressed? Everyone sat together and was served family style. What is family style dining? Family style is where the food is brought out and placed on the table. The food would be passed around as you do at home. This style of dining provided the opportunity for people to socialize and meet other people who came to Big Canoe. In the 1970s, since there wasn't a clubhouse, the lodge was a center point of activities as well as the swim club. The lodge has been a barn, a private residence, a lodge for guests, an activity center, and now is used as the POA offices. Tennis was big in the 70s at Big Canoe. In the background, you see Wolfscratch School and also a gray inflatable tent. That's where the indoor tennis was played. Okay, notice in the background on Little McElroy Mountain that there's no homes there. And then also there, just past the tennis courts, there's a cabin there. That's no longer in Big Canoe. I don't know what happened to it. I just think it was torn down. In 1974, Big Canoe hired Roscoe Tanner, a top player on the pro tennis circuit, as a touring tennis pro. Big Canoe was very proud of their accomplishment. They ran ads announcing Tanner as their touring pro. Tanner beat Borg in one of the matches in 1978, eliminating Borg from the Wimbledon finals. Big Canoe had several celebrity tennis tournaments in the early 70s. And at one of those tournaments, Pepper Rogers, head Georgia Tech football coach, Bobby Riggs, a tennis pro, and Bobby Dodd, Georgia Tech athletic director, played in one of those tournaments. This is the first cart barn that Big Canoe had. It was located on Clubhouse Drive where the villas are today. I assume that this is where the golfers would check in and check out. In the late 70s, Big Canoe often sponsored celebrity tennis and golf tournaments. At one of the tournaments, both Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, both friends, played golf as celebrity guests. Take a look at these photos and what do you see? You see trees and more trees. There were no houses at the time in 1974 when these photos were taken. The wonderful, infamous slide. It brought so much joy to so many people. A lot of people have written about how much fun they had with the slide. It was taken down in the mid-90s for insurance purposes. The chapel was actually completed just a few hours before the first service that was performed at the chapel, which was Christmas Eve 1977. You had about 50 people in attendance. The weather was not good, and this was a pretty good attendance when considering the fact that you had about 150 homes in 1977. This is the first Lake Scotty clubhouse built in 1977. It was rather plain, but the people loved it. And I think I've heard some people enjoy it more than the actually current clubhouse that we have. If you look in the background, there's no houses on Little McElroy. Not only did Lake Scotty Clubhouse provide dining and food, it also housed the golf carts. So here's the guys that kept Big Canoe secure in the 70s. In the front is Anthony Jones, and the one leaning up against the truck is Joe Walker, who was the first fire chief. They handled everything. They took care of the security gate, public safety, and they were trained in the fire department as well. Imagine this fire truck going up the mountains. I can't, but maybe you can, but it did. This is the first playground in Big Canoe, and this was before the playfield. In the 70s in the United States, there was a recession. Jimmy Carter was president. Since Big Canoe was marketed as a second home resort, it had a limited market base. In the 70s, wages were low, gas prices were high, and there was not an influx of affluent buyers as we have today. Many second home resorts were already failing before Cousins developed Big Canoe. Financial problems and slow sales were apparent as early as 1974. Sea Pines ended their partnership with Cousins in that year. By the 70s, the banks took over Big Canoe. We were rocking in the 80s. Jane Fonda was teaching us how to exercise. We had cool cell phones so we could walk and talk. Our clothes were bright and stylish. We had it going on, didn't we? Not much was happening in Big Canoe in the 80s or 90s. The banks were in control of Big Canoe and they were trying to find ways to market and appeal to buyers. In the early 80s, to get things going in Big Canoe, they started marketing timeshares. And this really, as you see in the article, irked a bunch of homeowners. And so there was a lawsuit filed. This is based on an article dated September 27, 1981. Selling the timeshares at Big Canoe did give it a boost. Most of the timeshares were sold at the Pettit Ridge cottages. In one of Bill Byrne's interviews, he stated that he was the only investor um, in Big Canoe, and he didn't realize that he was the only person interested in purchasing and buying Big Canoe at that time. Bill Byrne, president of the Byrne Company, acquired Big Canoe in July of 1987. He is responsible for the growth and the expansion of Big Canoe beginning in the early 2000s. Not many changes were made or new construction took place immediately until he could have determined what he had purchased from the banks. He's mostly known for the Wildcat Recreation Center and neighborhood, although he is responsible for building the fitness center in 2001 and numerous other neighborhoods. Only one neighborhood was built after Tom Cousins departed, which was the Lake Watch villas that were built and sold in the late 70s. Woohoo! We did survive, and so did Big Canoe. So in the 2000s is when things started improving in Big Canoe. Bill Byrne started building new neighborhoods, new amenities, and we got a lot of sprucing up. Let's start with an entranceway. So we had the first main gate since 1973, and I believe it wasn't until 2011 that we got this gate, and of course it's changed since then as well. Just to give you a view of what the marina looked like in 1989 and into the 2000s, we have come a long way, haven't we? The Veterans Day tornado or storm was a major event in Big Canoe. It happened on Veterans Day, November the 10th, 2002. This is just to give you some images of what the storm damage was, but in the background is the chapel, and this is the play field, and to the right is the tree toppers. The first Lake Scotty clubhouse that was built in 1977 was struck by lightning in August of 2006. It had already been earmarked as a teardown. The insurance proceeds from the fire was used towards the construction of the current clubhouse. Okay, so the clubhouse is burned down. So where did people eat? Where did they dine while they were waiting on a new clubhouse to be built? The Lake Scotty restaurant was temporarily relocated at the swim club until another clubhouse could be built. The first house built in Big Canoe was built in 1974 by Tom and Bobby Otsby. It's located on Buckskull Ridge Road, and they were the first permanent residents in Big Canoe.